In a town like Westbrook, where the lines between the privileged and the rest were stark and unspoken, standing out was dangerous. The old ways of thinking, passed down through generations, lingered in every corner, and for black kids in Westbrook High, blending into the background was the safest way to survive. Isaiah Carter, a 16-year-old with quiet strength, had spent most of his life learning how to stay out of the spotlight. His mother, a nurse working 2 jobs to support them, had always told him to keep his head down and keep moving forward. It's easier that way, she would say. Isaiah had learned to follow her advice, understanding that peace came from being invisible. His grandfather, Elijah Carter, had a different approach. Elijah had lived a tough life, once a prizefighter known for his speed and power in the ring. Even in his later years, his hands were calloused, his knuckles scarred from decades of battles both inside and outside the ring. His voice was a deep baritone, a tone that commanded attention. A man can only be pushed so far before he has to push back, he would say, his eyes glinting with a wisdom that came from years of resilience. Elijah had taught Isaiah how to defend himself, how to move, how to strike, how to hold his ground. But Isaiah never intended to use what he learned. Fighting, in his mind, was just another skill to keep in his back pocket, like math or reading. He didn't want to be noticed. He didn't want to be a target. But as with most things in life, the rules changed. Westbrook wasn't a place where equality ruled. It was a town where power belonged to the few, the ones who had the means to enforce their will. In Isaiah's quiet existence, his desire to avoid trouble didn't protect him from the inevitable. Westbrook had already decided that he was a target, that he didn't belong, that his quiet nature was a weakness. Westbrook High was predominantly white, and the black students there had learned long ago how to navigate the social minefield of the school's power structure. Isaiah had learned those rules well. Keep your head down, stay out of the way, and avoid the people who had the ability to ruin your life. But one person at the top of that list was undeniable: Troy Henshaw. Troy wasn't just a bully. He was a predator. The son of the town's police chief, Troy carried his last name like a shield, a weapon he wielded whenever he needed to remind someone of their place. He wasn't afraid to use his father's name to intimidate anyone who dared challenge him. His reputation was built on fear, and he reveled in it. Troy had always been untouchable, a golden child, and the idea that someone would stand up to him was laughable. Troy didn't just make kids' lives miserable for fun. He hunted the ones he deemed weak, those who wouldn't fight back, those who didn't fit into his idea of who deserved to be in Westbrook. Isaiah had learned to walk around him, to avoid his gaze, to dodge any situation that might provoke Troy's wrath. But there was one thing Isaiah couldn't control: his younger sister, Amara. Amara was 12, still learning how the world worked. And in Westbrook, that was a dangerous thing to be. Troy had already set his sights on her. And unlike Isaiah, Amara didn't have the tools to avoid confrontation. She was an easy target, naive to the unspoken rules of survival. Troy wasted no time in picking her apart, making her life difficult, one cruel comment at a time. At first, it was small things: a shove in the hallway, a harsh word when no one was looking. Isaiah had brushed it off. He told Amara to ignore it. "Don't give them what they want," he'd said. "Just keep walking. It'll blow over." But it didn't. Troy didn't stop there. The teasing turned into shoves, tripping her in the hallways and stealing her lunch. The threats began to seep into her every day, and Isaiah could see the toll it was taking on her. The way she flinched whenever Troy's presence loomed, how she walked faster to avoid him, how her shoulders hunched in fear. And then one day, everything changed. It was an afternoon like any other. Isaiah was walking home from school, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his mind still wrapped around the day's lessons. But something was different. He heard laughter, not the kind of laughter that came with fun or joy, but the cruel kind, the kind that meant someone was in trouble. His pace quickened as he turned the corner, heading toward the alleyway near the gas station. His stomach sank when he saw what was happening. Amara was there, her back pressed against the brick wall, her face pale but still defiant. Troy was standing in front of her, a mocking smirk stretched across his face, one hand gripping her backpack, holding it just out of reach. His friends stood around him, laughing, entertained by the spectacle. "Come on, Amara," Troy called, his voice taunting. "Say you're sorry for being such a freak, and maybe I'll give it back." Amara clenched her jaw, refusing to back down. "Go to hell, Troy." Troy's smile widened, his eyes narrowing with contempt. He shoved her, not hard enough to hurt her, but just enough to make her stumble. Enough to remind her of her powerlessness. Isaiah didn't think. He moved on instinct, his body moving faster than his mind could process. He was across the alley in seconds, grabbing Troy's wrist before the bully could hurt Amara again. The laughter died. The air changed. For the first time in a long time, Isaiah wasn't invisible anymore. Troy looked at him, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Oh, look," he sneered. "Big Brother's here to play hero." Isaiah's voice was calm, controlled. "Let her go." Troy scoffed, yanking his arm back. "Relax. Man, we're just having some fun." Isaiah's grip tightened. He wasn't afraid, but he wasn't going to fight. Not yet. "It's over," he said, pulling Amara gently toward the street. Troy chuckled behind them. "What? You going to hit me, Carter?" he taunted. Isaiah didn't roar. The next few days felt like a weight pressing down on Isaiah's chest. He had tried to shake off the anger, the frustration, but it lingered, simmering beneath the surface. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, his mind replaying the scene with Troy over and over. Troy's smug grin, the way he shoved Amara, and the taunting words, "You're just like everyone else." Too scared to do anything about it. It ate at him, it burned in his chest, a reminder of the power Troy wielded without fear of consequences. Isaiah's body ached from the gym session he'd had that night, pounding the punching bag in a futile attempt to release some of that tension. His fists hurt. His breath came in sharp bursts, but the anger didn't go away. No matter how hard he hit the bag, the thought that Troy thought he was weak, that he thought he could get away with anything, kept pushing him. That night, after dinner, Elijah noticed. His grandfather always noticed when something was wrong. They sat at the dinner table in silence. Isaiah poking at his food, Amara unusually quiet beside him, and their mother still at work, leaving the house empty except for the heavy silence hanging in the air. Elijah cleared his throat and set his fork down, his voice low but firm. "You going to tell me what happened?" His words weren't demanding, but there was an underlying strength that made it clear he already knew something wasn't right. Isaiah hesitated, unsure whether to bring it up, but Amara spoke first, her voice small and uncertain. "It was Troy," she said, stabbing at her mashed potatoes with her fork, her gaze downcast. Elijah's eyes hardened, but his face remained unreadable. He looked at Isaiah, his gaze sharp, probing. "You do anything about it?" he asked quietly. Isaiah's grip on his fork tightened. He didn't answer immediately. His thoughts were racing. Should he tell him? Should he admit that he had walked away? The anger still simmered beneath the surface, but he didn't want to give voice to it. Not yet. But then Elijah let out a long breath and leaned back in his chair. "Hein?" he muttered, the word thick with thought. It wasn't a lecture. It wasn't disappointment. It was understanding. Isaiah pushed his chair back and stood up abruptly. He had to do something. Anything. The weight of his decision pressed on him. Elijah didn't stop him. He just watched as Isaiah stormed out of the room, heading for the garage. The garage had been converted into a makeshift gym years ago. Punching bags, a speed bag, weights, and an old wooden floor that had seen decades of use. Isaiah shed his hoodie and got to work, his fists slamming into the heavy bag with all the frustration, anger, and regret that had built up over the last few days. His knuckles burned against the worn leather, but it didn't matter. He hit harder, faster, his mind swirling with thoughts of Troy's face and how he had felt powerless to do anything. His grandfather's words echoed in his head. Bullies like Troy don't stop until they're made to stop. Isaiah's breath came in sharp bursts, his body already moving before his mind could catch up. The weight of everything poured out of him with every strike. Then, a hand stopped the bag mid-swing. Isaiah froze, chest heaving. Sweat dripped down his face, his breath ragged. His grandfather, Elijah, stood in front of him, arms crossed, eyes calm but sharp. "You fight like you're already mad at yourself," Elijah said quietly. Isaiah swallowed, staring at the floor. His body was still wound tight, like a spring ready to snap. Elijah's eyes softened, but there was still a sharpness in his voice. "Let me guess. You wanted to hit him, but you didn't. Now you're wondering if you made the wrong choice." Isaiah clenched his fists, the tension building in his shoulders. He didn't want to admit it, but his grandfather was right. He had wanted to swing. He had wanted to wipe the smug grin off Troy's face. But he had known that if he did, he wouldn't just be fighting Troy. He would be fighting the system that protected him. And he wasn't sure he was ready for that. "Yeah, you're right," Isaiah muttered, his voice tight. Elijah studied him for a long moment before speaking again. You were smart, boy, he said slowly. But being smart don't always feel good, does it? Isaiah exhaled sharply, shaking his head. He knew exactly what his grandfather meant. The right choice wasn't always the easy one. And sometimes doing the right thing felt worse than giving in to the anger. You're playing by their rules. Elijah continued, his voice steady but hard. You're waiting for them to be fair, to see reason. But they won't. Bullies like Troy don't stop until they're made to stop. And when you do hit back, Elijah's gaze intensified. You better make damn sure it counts. Isaiah swallowed hard, his heartbeat pounding in his chest. Elijah patted the punching bag, and the action was almost like a signal. Keep hitting, he said, his voice quiet but resolute. But when the time comes, don't just throw punches. Win. Isaiah nodded, his mind racing. He didn't have the luxury of making mistakes anymore. The next time he faced Troy, he had to make it count. He kept walking, ignoring the bait, but inside, his blood was boiling. The air felt heavier with every step. He was so close to losing control, to giving in to the anger that surged in his chest. But he knew what would happen if he did. If he struck Troy, it wouldn't just be one fight. It would be a fight against the entire system that protected him. Troy was untouchable, and Isaiah wasn't about to let him win that easily. As they walked away, Troy's mocking voice echoed in their ears. That's what I thought, he yelled. You're all just too scared to do anything about it. Isaiah didn't respond. He didn't need to. He knew this wasn't over. Troy had made a mistake. He had underestimated him. He thought Isaiah would always back down, but Isaiah wasn't going to take it anymore. 2 days later, Isaiah couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. The anger he had been holding inside now had a purpose. His hands no longer trembled from frustration, but were steady, filled with resolve. He had a plan, but more importantly, he had the strength to back it up. After school, the parking lot was almost empty, the sun hanging low in the sky and casting long shadows across the pavement. Isaiah had just finished basketball practice, his muscles sore from the exertion, but his mind was still caught between exhaustion and the rage that had been building inside him. He had hoped that Troy would back off after their last encounter. Maybe, just maybe, he would find someone else to target. But he was wrong. The sound of a sharp, angry voice broke through the haze of his thoughts. It was Amara. The panic in her tone sent a chill down his spine. And before he even thought about it, he was already moving. He rounded the corner behind the school and froze. Troy had her again. Amara was on the ground, her backpack spilled beside her, her books scattered across the pavement. Troy stood over her, his laughter ringing out as his friends stood off to the side, watching in amusement. Isaiah's blood ran cold, but his heart pounded louder in his chest. This was it. This was the moment. Without thinking, he charged forward, his feet pounding against the pavement. His focus was clear. Get to Amara first. Make sure she was okay. When he reached her, he helped her up, checking to make sure she wasn't hurt. But Troy wasn't done yet. He shoved Isaiah, not lightly, but with enough force to provoke him. The push was hard, aggressive, meant to make Isaiah react. Isaiah stumbled back a step, but quickly caught his balance. His jaw clenched. He had to stay calm. He had to wait. Troy's voice cut through the silence, his words taunting, daring Isaiah to make a move. Come on, Carter, do something. Isaiah didn't flinch. He didn't react. His body was steady, controlled, just as his grandfather had taught him. He didn't give Troy the satisfaction of seeing him lose control. Not this time. Troy sneered, stepping closer, invading Isaiah's space. He swung first, the punch wild and sloppy, driven by nothing but anger. Isaiah saw it coming from a mile away. He sidestepped, letting Troy's fist slice through empty air, sending him off balance. That was all Isaiah needed. With quick precision, he stepped in, delivering a sharp jab to Troy's ribs. Not reckless, not wild, just enough force to send a clear message. Troy gasped, his face contorting in shock as he staggered back. His friends, who had been laughing moments ago, were now silent. They didn't know what to make of it. Troy straightened, his face turning red with humiliation and fury. He swung again, but this time, Isaiah was ready. He stepped in with a clean, controlled movement, his elbow catching Troy just below the shoulder, sending him off balance again. Another step, another shove. Troy stumbled backward, his arms flailing as he tried to catch himself before hitting the pavement. Silence. The air thick with the tension of the moment. Troy's breath was ragged, his fists trembling at his sides. For the first time, he hesitated. Doubt flickered across his face. Isaiah didn't move. He didn't need to. He was waiting for Troy to make the next move. But Troy, for the first time in his life, wasn't sure if he could win this fight. Isaiah could see it. The realization that he had been defeated. Troy was no longer the untouchable bully. The crowd, his friends, the school. It wasn't with him anymore. And then, Troy did the one thing Isaiah didn't expect. He turned and walked away. Isaiah didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He had won. And Troy knew it. As he watched Troy retreat, something inside him shifted. It wasn't about proving something to Troy anymore. It was about taking control of his life, taking control of his story. Amara stepped closer to him, still clutching her backpack, her knuckles white around the straps. Her voice was quiet but strong. "You okay?" she asked. Looking up at him, with a mixture of relief and admiration, Isaiah nodded, a small, determined smile crossing his face. "I'm good. You?" She nodded, but there was something different in her eyes now. A strength she hadn't had before. And it wasn't just because of what he had done. It was because she knew, deep down, that she didn't have to be afraid anymore. The next day, Isaiah walked into Rivertown High with a different feeling. The whispers he had expected were there, but this time, they weren't just about him. The fight wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a symbol. He wasn't the kid who stayed in his lane. He wasn't the one who kept his head down. He was the one who had stood up. And people noticed. The students stared at him. Some with admiration, some with suspicion, some nodded, silent approval in their eyes. Isaiah knew what that look meant. He wasn't the only one who had suffered at the hands of Troy's cruelty. He wasn't the first, and he wouldn't be the last. By second period, his worst fear was confirmed. A voice crackled through the intercom. "Isaiah Carter, report to the principal's office immediately." When he entered, the atmosphere was tense. Principal Reynolds sat behind his desk, but he wasn't alone. Chief Henshaw was there, looming in the corner, his arms crossed over his broad chest, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Isaiah's stomach sank. He knew what this was. Principal Reynolds cleared his throat, his voice unnervingly formal. "Isaiah, do you know why you're here?" Isaiah glanced at Henshaw before turning back to the principal. "No," he said, his voice steady but guarded. Henshaw let out a low chuckle, shaking his head as if Isaiah were a child who didn't understand what was happening. "Don't play dumb, son. You put my boy in the dirt yesterday." Isaiah didn't flinch. "Your boy put his hands on my sister first." Reynolds shifted in his seat, uncomfortable under the weight of the conversation. But Henshaw's expression didn't change. "I don't give a damn what you think happened," Henshaw snapped. "Here's what I know. Troy came home last night with a busted lip, talking about how some thug jumped him. That's a problem." Isaiah clenched his fists at his sides. "And what about Troy?" he asked, his voice tight. "We'll be handling that internally," Reynolds muttered, his voice faltering. Isaiah let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Right? Which means nothing's going to happen to him." Henshaw's smile widened, smug and knowing. "Now you're getting it." Isaiah didn't have time for this. He had been expecting it, but it still stung. He knew what was coming next, but he wasn't going to back down.